Hello and welcome to my first video on this channel. As of today, there are 108 days until election day, and I'll be documenting my prediction for the 2020 presidential election between Republican nominee Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden. This prediction is just personally what I think the outcome will be based on current trends and data, and can be drastically changed from now until November by some unforeseen event. So let's start with the Republican safe states of Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, except for the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, West Virginia, Indiana, and Alaska. These are extremely rural states that have a history of supporting the Republican Party dating back to the 80s and will likely stay that way for time to come. Except, I truly believe that Mississippi will be a likely Republican state this election due to the large amount of black voters expected to show up in large numbers this election, and that Alaska will also be a likely Republican state this election because of the large amount of urbanization around Juneau and Anchorage. Now for the Democratic safe states, which are Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York. These are all extremely urban states with either large amounts of minorities such as California and New York, or are extremely urbanized such as Massachusetts, and all traditional Democratic policies such as higher taxes on the rich, a strong federal government, and a great deal of business regulation are practiced in these states, which puts each of them into the Democratic safe column. So just by looking at the safe states, Donald Trump is in a clear disadvantage, already with Joe Biden leading by 57 electoral votes. Well, I believe that it's not impossible for Donald Trump to win re-election, but when you look at his approval ratings, over time his chances are getting slimmer and slimmer by the week. When he was elected president back in November of 2016, his approval ratings were close to the high 40s, but now they're hovering close to the 30s, which almost guarantees a loss if you look at historical records such as that of Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford, who both had extremely low approval ratings close to the end of their terms, and they did not win re-election. As I've already said, it isn't impossible for Donald Trump to win re-election, but if he does, it will be by slim margins in a few key states, and he will lose the popular vote again, just like in 2016, with it being especially hard to get large voter margins due to the bad press he's receiving from the media due to his delayed responses to COVID-19. Now let's start with the likely Democratic states, the most obvious of which being Nevada, New Mexico, and Colorado. These three states are receiving large amounts of Hispanic voters in large metropolitan areas such as Las Vegas, Nevada, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Denver, Colorado. And now for the next most likely Democrat states, which are Virginia, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. In Virginia, the minority population, especially blacks, have been exploding in recent years, increasing by close to 10% since 2010, which is one likely reason why Virginia has been so reliably blue for the last few elections and will likely stay that way for time to come. New Hampshire, unlike Virginia, is not experiencing a boom in the minority population, but it is now mostly urbanized with only 4 counties accounting for 3/4 of the entire state's population, which puts the state into the likely Democratic column. In 2016, if it weren't for so much third-party voting, the state most likely would have gone to Donald Trump, but in 2020 it is looking more and more favorable for Joe Biden even without third-party voting. While Minnesota has been garnering more and more Republican votes every election, having even flipped two congressional seats red in 2018, it will more than likely stay in the Democratic column for the 2020 election. This is because the heart of the state, Minneapolis, was the epicenter of the George Floyd protests and riot, which spurred many people across the country to pledge themselves to get Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, with the state of Minnesota having the highest of these protests and riots. Now let's start with the likely, lean, and tilt Republican states, and the most obvious of which being Texas. Texas still has a very large rural population, and Donald Trump's approval ratings aren't as bad there compared to the rest of the country. However, I'm considering putting Texas into the tilt Republican column due to the negative responses to COVID-19 in the state, which would more than likely establish Texas as a swing state starting in 2020. Although, as of July 12th, Joe Biden has a very tiny edge over Trump in Texas, but it will most likely flip back into the Republican column by late August or early September. The next state that will likely go Republican, but not by a large amount, is Georgia. In 2018, the governor's race in Georgia was extremely close, with the Republican nominee Brian Kemp only winning by about 50,000 votes cast out of 4 million. Besides the extremely close race that resulted in Stacey Abrams getting national attention, Georgia has been urbanizing around Atlanta and Savannah very quickly over the past few years, but will most likely stay in the Republican tilt column until the 2024 or 2028 election. And while Ohio is considered a true swing state by twice providing electoral votes to the Democratic nominee and twice to the Republican nominee in the last 4 elections, I would categorize Ohio as a lean Republican state. This is because of the large population loss from the main urban centers of Cincinnati and Columbus to more rural parts of the state, and the fact that since December of 2018, Republicans have controlled close to 2/3 of the Ohio State House of Representatives. The situation in Iowa is similar to that of Ohio, with a large portion of the population residing in the countryside and the state legislative branch being predominantly Republican. However, the enthusiasm for the GOP in Iowa has been going down ever since 350,000 jobs were lost in the state between March and May 2020, which is why Iowa will only be secured by Donald Trump by a very small margin, putting the state into the Republican tilt column. While I'm saying right now that these states are more than likely to vote for the GOP in November, this prediction can change very quickly, as each of these states have a negative approval rating for Donald Trump, and as of July 6th, with Texas having a net negative of 1%, Ohio having a net negative of 3%, and Georgia and Iowa each having a net negative of 8%. These bad approval ratings, combined with falling support for the Republican Party, could cause each of these four states to vote for Joe Biden, with Iowa and Georgia being the most likely to fit blue. Now that we've covered the safe, likely, lean, and tilt Republican states from both sides of the map, the Electoral College is looking pretty even, with Donald Trump only trailing behind Joe Biden by about 26 electoral votes. The only states left are the states that truly decide each election, the toss-ups. Let's start with Arizona. Arizona used to be considered a safe red state, having voted Republican in the last 5 elections, but it has now become a toss-up state, having already flipped ascendancy in 2018 from Republican to Democrat, with the new Democratic senator winning by about 2.5%. With Donald Trump losing support across the entire state of Arizona due to COVID-19, Arizona will likely vote Democrat once more after voting a Democrat to the Senate just 2 years prior. In 2016, Donald Trump won the state of North Carolina by about 150,000 votes out of 4 million cast, with the African American turnout being about 64%, with close to 89% of that African American turnout voting for Hillary Clinton. In 2020, the voter turnout for African Americans in the state is expected to increase from 64% to close to 77%, so even if Donald Trump keeps his share of the African American vote in North Carolina at 11%, he will still lose the state by a very small margin due to the influx of African Americans, putting North Carolina into the tilt Democratic column. Every election since 2000, Florida has been an extremely close state, always having its 29 electoral votes, one within 1 or 2% of all votes cast, making this one if not one of the most important states in any election. Despite having voted for Donald Trump in 2016, I believe that Florida will be a lean blue state or most likely a tilt blue state in the 2020 election. The main reason I'm categorizing Florida as blue for 2020 is due to coronavirus concerns. As of June 2020, Florida has started to become the new worldwide epicenter for the coronavirus, with 0.1% of the total state population having contracted COVID-19. With Donald Trump not having done much for COVID in the state, many Floridians are seeking a new leader to help them battle the disease within the state. Florida will likely be the tipping point state of 2020, which secures Joe Biden's 270 electoral votes needed to clinch the presidency. By this point, Joe Biden has already won the presidency, but it would be wrong to leave out the upper Midwest where Donald Trump still has a chance of winning, but most likely will not. Out of the 3 states that flipped for him, they will most likely all flip back for the Democratic Party, with Wisconsin only being a tilt Democratic state. This is because Wisconsin voted for Donald Trump and by the largest margin out of the 3 upper Midwestern states, and still retains a large amount of support for Donald Trump. The Republican Party is still expected to hold on to the state legislative branch in Wisconsin, but the state as a whole will most likely not cast its electoral votes for Donald Trump. During Michigan's primary on March 10, 2020, Joe Biden won every single county in the state, proving that the state has a clear affinity for Biden. While this may seem likely, seeing as he is now the only candidate left, during the Michigan primary, Bernie Sanders was still leading in the polls as the presumptive Democratic nominee, and for literally every single vote in the state to vote for Joe Biden is incredible. One big reason why Trump won the state of Michigan is due to the large numbers of African Americans in the state showing up to show support for Donald Trump, as he promised to help them keep their jobs mainly in the automotive industry. But as I mentioned with North Carolina, his support among blacks is falling drastically, and the coronavirus has wiped out many of the jobs he helped keep before the virus wreaked havoc on the American economy, bringing Michigan's unemployment rate to close to 21.2%, one of the worst in the country. Donald Trump only won Michigan in 2016 by about 16,000 votes, which could be lost very easily to Joe Biden, and he most likely will due to the reason I've just mentioned, which is why I would categorize Michigan as a likely Democratic state. Just like with Michigan, Donald Trump won Pennsylvania mainly due to promising to help keep jobs in the state, primarily steelworkers, fracking workers, and coal miners in the western parts of the state, mainly surrounding Pittsburgh. It was these key groups that gave Donald Trump his victory in Pennsylvania, but now these groups are beginning to seem negatively due to the large job losses in the state, which is why I believe that these groups will vote blue this election, flipping Pennsylvania to a lean blue Democratic state. Besides the fact that Donald Trump is losing his support among blue-collar workers in the western half of Pennsylvania, Joe Biden can use the fact that he was born in Pennsylvania to his advantage, as it is his birth state, and will campaign extensively there. The last two possible electoral votes that I can give will most likely be to Donald Trump, with Maine's 1st district being a safe blue, and Maine senatorial districts also being a safe blue. I'm mainly giving the two last electoral votes to Donald Trump by small margins because he was able to secure them very easily in 2016, while even though they did vote for Barack Obama in both 2008 and 2016, but flipping red by a large amount in 2016. While it is very hard to predict these two regions, I will give them both to Donald Trump, as he did perform exceptionally well there in 2016. In conclusion, I believe that Joe Biden will safely clinch the presidency, winning both the popular vote and electoral college with 333 electoral votes compared to Donald Trump's 205 electoral votes. The biggest reasons why Joe Biden will likely clinch a victory is mainly due to internal struggles within the United States, such as the coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter movement, which will garner him victories in key states all across the nation. Now that I've covered everything, I would like to thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe.